Welcome, friends, to S&M2.
Somebody had the idea of bringing Metallica back together with the San Francisco Symphony. I thought it was perfect.
I was a little fearful at first, but the more we talked about it, the more I felt more comfortable with it. And we're musicians, man. We got giant egos and we're insecure. So, we're going to play with some real musicians.
Any opportunity I get to play with an orchestra or classical musicians is a huge, huge opportunity for me. I feel like I'm in heaven when I'm on that stage and playing my loud, heavy metal, distorted power chords, and then the orchestra just like falls right in.
It was really cool because there was this collaborative spirit, and that was the thing that I think was different than S&M1. The stars really did align. There's nothing like being in the middle of all that energy between 80 classical musicians, and then on the outside of that, you've got the fans.
All weekend really was about celebrating San Francisco, celebrating San Francisco culture, San Francisco values, and what San Francisco represents to us and to the rest of the world.
San Francisco is a popular destination regardless of what may be happening in and around the city at any given time. But on the weekend of September 6th through September 8th, 2019, the city by the Bay became a mecca for music enthusiasts the world over. For many, the groundbreaking 1999 collaboration between Metallica and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra was the stuff of legend. An unlikely pairing, perhaps, but a mix of two mighty masses of sound colliding in what would go down in history as one of the best and most unique concert experiences of a generation. I'm Andy Hall, and I'll be your host over the next 2 hours as we talk with James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, Robert Trujillo, as well as a cast of key players who brought the vision of S&M2 to life.
This was also a celebration of the San Francisco Philharmonic and also Michael Tilson Thomas, who I was actually a huge fan of before I even knew he was going to be a part of this.
To me, personally, it's a very San Francisco-centric project. And obviously, like I said, it sort of has its roots in the opening night festivities to the new building.
The people who are opening up a new venue in San Francisco called the Chase Center approached us about helping them open up the venue. They were having a week of celebrations. We're having sporting events and music events, and they wanted us to be a part of the music event. So we said, sure. And then literally like 2 seconds later, they said, would you like to revisit the S&M shows with the San Francisco Symphony? And we thought about it for like maybe 3 seconds and said, of course we would.
While we're on this planet, we want to try these things, and why would we not? And again, that whole dare to fail kind of attitude, I think people really do embrace that. And even if it doesn't work, I mean, there's plenty of things that have not worked the way we had expectations around, but at least we tried them and we did our best. I think S&M2 just nailed it. And so how else are you going to expand and explore without taking some risks,
That was what came first, and then the idea of celebrating not just the new arena, but the 20th anniversary of the OG S&M. How that all came together was so effortless, so organic. There was no questions. I mean, it was just yes or yes, whichever one of those two versions is more applicable. And so it was the perfect combination and marriage of all these different energies coming together.
Casual and hardcore Metallica fans alike would have bet their snake pit passes that a reprise of S&M would never happen again. But lightning would strike twice, and fans from all over the world would converge onto the Bay Area for a weekend they'd never forget. The show begins, as all Metallica shows have since the very early days, with the Ecstasy of Gold. James, that's a song that already had a special meaning to you in this band, but now with the passing of its composer Ennio Morricone recently, even more significance, I imagine.
Ennio Morricone, the maestro of all maestros in my eyes, was very much, I guess I would say he's more of a rebel in that world. He went for stuff that no one thought was okay in that world. And he pushed the limits, and he did lots of different things that others wouldn't have done. Guitars completely out of tune, screaming and weird instruments, and just, I loved the rawness of his approach. And Ecstasy of Gold has been a part of our show for so long. And the fact that he knew about us was a huge thing to me, sitting in Johnny Z's living room, hearing on an album, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, we put this song on, and suggested it, and never would I have thought we'd be where we are, and Mr. Morricone would have known who we were.
And at this very moment, members of Metallica are taking the stage, joining forces with the Michael Tilson Thomas-led San Francisco Symphony in front of a sellout crowd at the christening of San Francisco's new venue, the Chase Center, and about to get the musical proceedings officially underway with a classic from 1984's Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Welcome to the celebration of Metallica's S&M2. For Whom the Bell Tolls from S&M2, available now in a variety of formats. I'm Andy Hall, joined by the 4 members of Metallica to discuss the band's second collaboration with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. Let's talk about preparation first. James, how did your approach differ this time around? And what bits of advice, if any, would you have appreciated back in 1999 that you could have applied 20 years later?
We're all human and we're all good at certain things in different ways. So, what we bring, they admire, and what they bring, we admire. So it will all work out, and try not to be intimidated, but to just enjoy the moment. And, whatever energy you bring, they're stoked. They're stoked to have that. 2 very different worlds, and just be a little more, I'd tell myself, be a little more gentle with yourself and not punish or, worry too much about it. It's all going to be fine.
How about for you, Kirk? Have your methods changed much over the course of 20 years in terms of preparing for a unique show like this?
I think when we did the first shows, I wasn't so much into stuff like yoga. And I've been doing yoga for about 20 years now. So I do yoga before every show, just so I'm grounded and loose and focused. In preparation for these 2 S&M shows, 2 weeks out, I upped my physical activity, my exercise schedule. I upped my running. I ran longer. I went to the gym and getting the physical aspect of myself in shape. And then about a week out, I upped my guitar practicing routine, and I almost exclusively played acoustic guitar, so I could build up my hands nice and strong, so that when I went to the electric guitar for those first rehearsals and those first shows, my hands were like super strong. That was my way of getting ready for these shows, because I really wanted them to be special, and I wanted to be at a level of musicianship and at a level of readiness that was comparable to the orchestra. Because the classical musicians, their musicality is so great and on such a high level, and I wanted to just attempt to meet their level of musicianship somehow, some way. So that's what I did.
And for you, Robert, this being your maiden voyage with the symphony?
It's interesting because during the meet and greets, I had some fans asking me kind of like, you must be scared. You must be really, really freaked out or nervous. And the truth of the matter was, as we had been touring for almost 2.5 years, and Europe was very intense because we were playing these massive stadiums, and Kirk and I were doing these crazy duets. So we'd be in like Estonia or like Russia, and we would play a song in honor of that city in that language. So I was singing in Russian and Polish and various languages. So I was really more nervous about that than actually S&M2. So in answer to your question, for me, I felt that our tour schedule and everything we had done prior to S&M2 was preparation for that experience.
I'm sure the answer to this question varies show by show, Lars, but how long does it take you in a show like S&M2 to feel truly dialed in, especially with so many moving parts in a live setting that's anything but typical? Was there a moment you realized it all came together?
Yeah, I would say pretty much by the end of the second night, I was going, you know what, this may work out. So if we had done show 3, 4, and 5, they would have been incredible. No, I mean, it. Obviously, the orchestra is very different than it was 20 years ago. At least half the material to 2/3 of the material was different than it was 20 years ago. You got a new arena that's never had an event in it, much less a rock and roll band. You got a new stage that none of us had ever played on before. I mean, every single element was just new and being explored. And so to be honest with you, and I say this with nothing but love, the upside of working with an orchestra as incredible as the SFO and working with people like MTT and Edward Outwater is that these guys are total pros. Everything's planned months and months in advance. The downside for a band like us is that their forte is basically reading the sheet music, so they don't need very much rehearsal, but we don't read sheet music, at least not when we play concerts. And so we memorize all this stuff from rehearsal. When you're playing with a symphony, with an orchestra, it's not like, the outro of I don't know, no-leaf clover if we just decide spur of the moment to do, 32 bars instead of 16 bars. That's not going to fly.
I know that S&M1 was challenging. It was, technology was different at the time. There was even, I think, some issues with the acoustic instruments and the tuning and everything. So it's kind of like they weathered that storm. Then I heard No Leaf Clover, and I thought that was really, really great. I was very impressed. And then I was just like, you know what? Metallica does it again, So I was super excited for what they had accomplished. And now it's interesting because with S&M2, I am so honored to be a part of this experience, and I know that it sort of becomes this really amazing collaboration, and I get on that magic carpet and ride it with them. So it was really cool.
You both mentioned No Leaf Clover, which made its debut at the original S&M show in April of 1999. Let's fast forward 20 years and take a listen to the September 2019 rendition as our celebration of S&M2 continues with Metallica and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra.
the soothing light at the end of your tunnel. Is this a freight train coming your way? Yeah, there comes to be the soothing light at the end of your tunnel. Is this a freight train coming your way? Yeah, don't it feel right like this? Yeah, all the pieces fall to his wish. Sucker for that quick reward, boy. Sucker for that quick reward, they say. Then it comes to be that the soothing light at the end of your tunnel. It's just a freight train coming your way. Yeah, there comes to be the soothing light at the end of your tunnel. Was just a freight train coming your way. Yeah, it's coming your way. Coming your way. Yeah, here it comes.
That was No Leaf Clover from Metallica's S&M2, which is now available worldwide. Lars, one aspect of Metallica's live show that I always like to ask you specifically about are the decisions behind your set lists. 3 studio albums the band have released since 1999. Were there songs you felt particularly excited about in terms of giving them the S&M treatment?
I was excited about adding a bunch of songs to the repertoire. We love all the songs from the recent records as much as we love the older songs. And I was very excited. Really the first phase of the project was for Michael Tilson Thomas and his team to kind of sit down and kind of start sort of rummaging through what of the newer songs would lend themselves to an orchestral interpretation, and for him and his team to, write new orchestral arrangements and so on. But it was an open book. So between Saint Anger and Death Magnetic and Hardwired, what do you got? 30 songs, give or take. It's very much like a puzzle. You just go through them, and it was a very collaborative effort. His arranger kind of sit down and take a stab at what songs that they felt would lend themselves to this kind of interpretation. So there were some songs, obviously, A Day That Never Comes or An Unforgiven 3, or you kind of sit there and go like, this would probably really work, Halo on Fire. But ultimately, it had to check a bunch of boxes, which, the primary box was that would work well with an orchestral interpretation. That was really the top criteria.
It was really difficult to, choose which ones were fitting, which ones weren't, all within my hands. We rewrote, it was like we definitely did it in a different style. I think first of all for an acoustic show, and then that seemed to fit right in.
Our acoustic version of All Within My Hands is a real different version that's on Saint Anger. We wrote it acoustically. Whenever we play benefits, they tend to be acoustic. And so All Within My Hands is a track that we've been playing for like the last 5 or 6 years. And so when we were coming up with the set list, that was pretty much a natural pick to represent Saint Anger.
We'll be right back with more from the band, as well as the debut of a brand new Metallica symphony arrangement, right after this.
Now,
Welcome, friends.
the concert event of the year comes home. Metallica and the San Francisco Symphony.
To the sky before you die.
S&M2. Over 2 hours of music.
Within my hands.
S&M2. Out now.
Welcome back to the celebration of S&M2. I'm Andy Hall, joined by Metallica's James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, Robert Trujillo, as well as some of the contributors that made S&M2 come alive in September of 2019, 20 years after the first iteration of Metallica's alliance with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. Robert, since you weren't yet a part of the band at that point, I'd love to hear your impressions of that initial concert series.
That is really an interesting story, because I remember when I had first heard about S&M1 back in the day. I was working with Ozzy Osbourne, and I was in that bubble, that Ozzy bubble. Whenever I play in each sort of band, whether it was Suicidal Tendencies or even like when I work with Jerry Cantrell, you kind of get in this bubble and you don't know a whole lot of what's going on beyond that universe. But I did hear that Metallica was playing with an orchestra on this particular night, 20-something years ago, and I thought to myself, really? That's interesting.
James, when you hear about or see the incredible demand for these shows, the way diehard Metallica fans from every state in the U.S., several countries from all over the world, have embraced this concept, what does that mean to you, having taken on that risk and now seeing the impact of it all 20 years later?
I guess it really solidifies the fact that if you feel that it's right as an artist and you feel that there's passion and love in it, you can't really go wrong. Even if it doesn't work, there's plenty of things that have not worked the way we had expectations around. Some were really big flops. Other ones worked enough that people did like them. And then other things like, I think S&M2 just nailed it.
The members of Metallica weren't the only ones that had to prepare for performing at the center of a world-class symphony orchestra. Avi Vinocur, who previously collaborated with the band on their 2019 LP Helping Hands live and acoustic at the Masonic, tells the story of his big moment during the S&M2 performance of All Within My Hands.
The fact that I had sang with James at that Fillmore show with Sammy Hagar, he was like, I think he can do harmonies. And I think that's kind of what led to this, is that they know what I do and they know that I play mandolin mostly. It just kind of exploded from there. But to be actually standing on a stage with them around you and just sort of, you get swooped up in this tornado of what's going on and you're just sort of locked in the moment. It was kind of easier to focus on what I was doing for some reason. There's some sort of cosmic thing between them where you just kind of, when you're up there, you just kind of stay in it. But a crowd that enormous, I've never played in front of an arena or sang. Totally mind-blowing. I wish everyone could stand up there and feel that. In S&M, it was kind of crazy. So I work for the band as like a studio tech, and I heard them rehearsing in the other room, and then they started doing All Within My Hands. And then I heard the door open from the rehearsal room. It was like, Avi, where's Avi? I was like, oh, yeah, right. I had just gotten back from like a trip to Walgreens to run an errand to get something for somebody. And then I went in and they're like, do you remember your part from the Masonic show? I was like, yeah, I think I do. And I just went in, and James sort of looked over at me and was like, he's been very, very supportive of having me. So I think he likes the way our voices meld, and so he seemed happy about it. And very fortunately, everybody kind of just locked in, and it felt good. I don't know, I just sang my part into a mic, and they were like, it sounds great. What are you doing in 3 days? I was like, I guess I'm playing an arena.
All within my hands, squeeze it in, crush it down. All within my hands, hold it dear, hold it suffocating. Hold within my hands, love to death, smack you round and round, and hold within my hands, beware. Love is control, I'll die if I let go. Love is control, I'll die if I let go. Hate me now, kill all within my hands, crush all within my hands, choke all within my hands, kill all within my hands again. All within my hands, take your fear, pump you up. All within my hands, let you run. Then I pull your leash and hold within my hands, under thumb, under to myself. All within my hands, beware. Love is control, I'll die if I let go. Love is control, I'll die if I let go. Hate me now, kill all within my hands, crush all within my hands, crush it down. All within my hands, hold it dear, hold it suffocating. All within my hands, beware. Love is control. Die if I let go. Love is control. I'll die if I let go.
All Within My Hands from Metallica and the San Francisco Symphony, and featuring Avi Vinocur on vocals alongside James Hetfield as part of S&M2, which is now available in a variety of forms worldwide. For those that ever dreamt of sharing the stage with Metallica, one need only to attend one of the band's shows to know how crucial the fans are to helping create moments of their own, like the sing-along that happened at the tail end of The Memory Remains, for example. What are those moments like when fans do something cool and unexpected like that? James, let's start with you.
It's just spectacular. You know, when you feel like you're up there scared and alone and you're playing something because you're so nervous, and then the fans sing something for you, it's just beautiful. It's like a giant pillow of comfort and support, you know, you just kind of lean back into, and it's like, yeah, I got brothers and sisters out there and they got our back. It feels beautiful.
The fans and the Metallica family is what makes all this worth it. And like I said before, the carrot that's always dangling in front of the band is to maximize that connection with the fans in a live situation. You know, when it happens and that feeling. And listen, I'd be lying to you if I said, you know, that's not something that happens at every show. It happens often, but it doesn't happen always. So obviously that's really what keeps us going, is that energy and that feeling and that sense of connection.
You're really experiencing something for the first time, which is very exciting. It's like, I'm a surfer, and every once in a while you get what's called a tube ride. And when you get a tube ride and you come out, it's amazing because it doesn't happen that often. And this was like the ultimate tube ride. It was like, you're in it, you come out, and you're just like, oh, because everything seemed to lock in, you know, and when the timing's there, and you also know that those musicians that are surrounding you up on that stage are also feeling that same kind of energy. It's very powerful.
S&M2 is available now in several formats, both online and in stores. Coming up, you'll hear the S&M treatment given to some of Metallica's newer material. And we'll also discuss the band's relationship with the orchestra's conductor, Michael Tilson Thomas, and an idea of his that broke some new ground in the partnership between Metallica and the San Francisco Symphony. All of that next as our celebration of S&M2 continues. Andy Hall back with more of the S&M2 celebration, starring Metallica's James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and Robert Trujillo. The album is now available for purchase in a variety of formats, featuring 20 songs and over 2.5 hours of music. Performed by Metallica in concert with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra in September of 2019 at the Chase Center. Some of the album's songs explore the band's most recent album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Kirk, was there a specific song from Hardwired that you felt translated especially well in this format?
Yes. Halo on Fire, I think, really benefits from what the orchestra brings. Classical music and the process of composing classical music is very similar to our approach and how we write music ourselves. And what it is you get a series of notes that make a riff or a chord progression, and you play that, and then you kind of mine those chord progressions or riff, and out of mining those riffs, you might take out a note here and a note there, and all of a sudden you have the next piece of music. And then you kind of like do that, and you build a whole piece just from these one or two ideas. And that's called the intellectual method. That's something that we have been doing since day one. And to hear that our process is similar to what the classical guys used to do was really cool and inspiring to me. But I mean, don't get me wrong; those guys did it on a way more intense level than we will ever do it. So I'm not comparing our technique and our process to the level of theirs. So don't get me wrong. And there is a real thread that actually all roads lead to classical music when you really think about it.
Let's take a listen. Halo on Fire as part of our celebration of Metallica's S&M2. One of several songs receiving the S&M treatment for the very first time, that was Halo on Fire, backed by the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, led by conductor Michael Tilson Thomas. Lars, talk about collaborating with him, how the band integrated his vision with yours into what became S&M2, and also on a personal level, what was it like sharing that experience with a guy that's not only a peer, but a friend of yours?
My personal relationship with him actually goes back to, I think, within a month of when the OG S&M came out in November 99, and him and I met. Him and I became friends, became great friends with his husband. It was a very easy and effortless relationship, and they've been so gracious over the years to always reach out. You know, obviously Michael's been the director of the symphony for a quarter of a century. This year was his last year, so there's been lots of great events that he has been spearheading, and so he's always encouraged me and my family to come and join, see special concerts, you know, come check this thing out, come check out this Copland thing, come check out this Mahler thing. It's been a very invigorating relationship with MTT over the years and with the symphony, and it feels like ever since we did the first project 20 years ago that the relationship has really stayed intact, even though Michael obviously wasn't involved in the OG one. He's basically, obviously, like I said, as the director of the symphony for the last 25 years, has been a very significant part of the music scene in San Francisco, the culture scene, and the creative energy of this beautiful city. So it really was kind of an easy and fun thing to put together once again.
And Robert, you've got some MTT history of your own, do you not?
Michael Tilson Thomas, I was actually a huge fan of before I even knew he was going to be a part of this, because he had conducted orchestras on some crazy jazz albums that I was really into back in the 70s. So I was a fan. And the stars kind of aligned, I think, between the opening of the San Francisco Chase Center and, you know, Michael Tilson Thomas retiring from the San Francisco Philharmonic and, you know, anniversary time, but also what ended up being the grand finale of our tour cycle. You know, we didn't know that was going to happen, but with the current situation, it became sort of that final statement, and it ended up becoming more of a celebration.
James, what were your early impressions of the maestro?
Michael Tilson Thomas, very schooled, very educated, very well-versed in any style and any type of music. He understands music inside and out. So when we got together with him, just as many ideas coming, you know, from him. And I think there were a lot more ideas coming from us because we had done this before. But yeah, Michael Tilson Thomas was not afraid at all to jump in there and suggest some stuff. Like the song Iron Foundry, you know, was something that he was thinking about it, like, wow, industrial metal, hey, Iron Foundry, this Russian composer from the 30s, how about we get Metallica to cover a symphony song, you know? Very, very cool idea, instead of just all being the other way around. So, yeah, a lot of differences, and then, again, a lot of similarities, you know, fearless.
Along with MTT, the late Michael Kamen, who was integral in bringing the original S&M to life 20 years ago, would be represented in the festivities as well. With a song from Metallica's 1991 self-titled album, that was the band's first experience working with the maestro. We'll hear that and much more coming up on the S&M2 celebration with the mighty, mighty Metallica. Welcome back to the celebration of Metallica's S&M2. I'm Andy Hall, and throughout this hour, we're going to dive even deeper into the emotional aspects that made that weekend in San Francisco so special. And we'll do it with the help of my special guests, Metallica's James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and Robert Trujillo, and more. James, we spoke earlier about how important composer Ennio Morricone was to you and the Metallica legacy. On the subject of iconic figures in music that have passed, it's well known how integral the late, great Michael Kamen was to the first iteration of S&M. Tell me a little about Maestro Kamen and how his approach may have differed from that of S&M2 conductor Michael Tilson Thomas.
Very different. Michael was a little more hands-on and in your face. He was not afraid to get into the rehearsal room and start bashing around on stuff. He was feeling the music that way. I think that, you know, the No Leaf Clover was certainly a big tip of the hat to Maestro Kamen. And I'm really, really proud that we did do that.
Certainly, No Leaf Clover wasn't the only way that the members of Metallica would pay tribute to the late maestro, as the band also performed the song that became their very first collaboration with Kamen during the making of 1991's self-titled Black Album. This is Nothing Else Matters on our celebration of Metallica's S&M2.
So close, no matter how far. Couldn't be much more from the heart. Forever trusting who we are, and nothing else matters. Trust I seek, and I find in you. Every day for us something new. Open mind for a different view, and nothing else matters. Never care what they do. Never care what they go. 'Cause I know so close, no matter how far. Could be much more from the heart. Forever trusting who we are, and nothing else matters. Never care for what they do. Never care for what they know. 'Cause I know. Oh, yes, I know. Never opened myself this way. Life is ours, we live it our way. All these words I want to say. No, nothing else matters. Never care for things they say. Never care for things they play. Never care for what they do. Never care for what they know. 'Cause I know. Yeah. So close, no matter how far. Could be much more from the heart. Forever trusting who we are.
A nod to the late Michael Kamen. Nothing Else Matters from Metallica's S&M2, which is now available for purchase worldwide. On the subject of tributes, Robert, I'll bring you in on this. We've seen you channel Cliff Burton on tour with your rendition of Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. Talk about the decision to allow the symphony's principal bass player, Scott Pingel, a self-proclaimed old-school Metallica fan, the opportunity to perform his interpretation of the song. What did you think of it?
In my opinion, it was the highlight moment of the show because Scott, I don't want to say he had to audition it for us, but he came in a couple days early and he played it for us. And initially, no one knew what to do. When he played it for us, it was obvious that this needs to be a standalone piece featuring him. And so I'm just like, bro, that is you. You need to do this on your own with Lars.
Kirk, you had something you wanted to add?
I have to say, that was a real pleasant surprise. He came down to our rehearsal place, HQ, and he played the bass solo for us. And it was pretty amazing because we didn't break out an electric bass. He brought his full stand-up bass and bow and proceeded to play the bass solo. He had a pedal board and a small amp that he had plugged that bass into, and when it came time to turn on that pedal board, he nailed Cliff's sounds. I was surprised at how close he was to catching those tones and that distortion. At one point, I thought, wow, there's someone in heaven looking down right now with a big old smile on their face.
Scott himself gives us a look into the process of how his big moment came to pass.
When I had pitched the idea, they thought, oh, that sounds cool, but, there's this classical guy. Maybe they can just kind of trade solos back and forth. And Rob was just so awesome. As we were standing there talking about it, and they're like, so how can we fit Rob in this? And Rob was like, you know what? I think that we should let this ride as it is with just the two of you. I think this needs to be its own thing.
Lars, this was a pretty rare occurrence to perform your drum parts on that song in a live setting.
In the OG Cliff Burton version, obviously there was drums, so that didn't feel like a stretch. And then Scott was very determined. MTT was very determined to start featuring members of the orchestra in kind of solo spots, and obviously we all encouraged that and supported it, but at the same time you don't really know. I mean, you can have all these great ideas, but you don't really know how it's going to play out until you're doing it. It was recognizable enough in the main melodies to be Cliff's, but at the same time obviously Scott was adding his own dynamic, his own vibe, his own elements to it. So it was incredible balance between showcasing the genius of Cliff Burton, showcasing the genius of Scott himself, and really bringing people together for what I thought was a very magical moment.
The architecture of that solo was meant to be that, I start very ethereal, and it was meant to be like sort of Cliff's spirit kind of emerging and us sort of together.
Anesthesia has only happened once since Cliff's untimely passing. And, when Rob and I took a chance on it, I think at an Orion festival back in Detroit 10 years ago. But other than that, I don't think that Anesthesia has really been attempted or played since Cliff's passing. So it was a very emotional moment, but I'm happy that Scott encouraged me to come and be part of it and add my 3 cents to it. So that was very cool.
At the end of his solo, he always played this cue to Lars to end it. So I play that in a very slow way. I took one of his last licks and I make it sort of the opening lick to sort of go in reverse in a way. It's him kind of calling out that I'm coming back. And then I start quoting, I kind of work my way slowly into his solo, but it's sort of contemplative and lamenting a little bit, because it's kind of like, hey guys, I love you guys, I miss you, and this is why I remember we used to do this together. Speaking of goosebumps, there's a moment in my solo where I turn on the fuzz, where I go and I hit this low chord. That is one of the most ecstatic experiences I've ever had in my life, because I could feel the sound in that room and the God knows how many watts of power. So I could feel that, and just having that power of that energy at my disposal, and as I hit that chord, I mean, you can't hear it. I haven't said this on any other interviews, but I actually yell. I went, ah! I actually just yelled in that moment. I just envisioned like lights just exploding, and like that's a moment where Cliff just sort of bursts through that barrier between this, like the spirit world and the physical realm. It's just like he's coming back now, and then this vitality in his life as I kind of fly up the fingerboard, and that's when I hit that's when I turn on my wah pedal. That's when it's like he really like comes to life, and I try to feel like I hand the reins over to him. James said something to me that was so spot on. After the first performance, he came up to me and he says, I was just watching you up there playing. And he said, watching you and then watching your colleagues react to you, he says, I just got the overwhelming feeling that everybody was looking at you saying, he's free. And there was something that was kind of set free to me by doing that. And it was just such a phenomenal experience. And then play that also with Lars. It's just so surreal thinking about back when I was 15 years old listening to that recording the first time, and you just never know where life will take you. I never could have imagined playing it with the very drummer on that recording. I mean, I just can't even put my head around that. It's just one of the most amazing experiences of my career, and it always will be.
I thought it was really beautiful that he also played it with Cliff Burton's father, Ray Burton, in the audience. And for Ray to witness that and experience that was just really beautiful because, we lost Ray Burton, and Ray was a dear friend of mine and ours. And, it's sad that he's no longer with us, but you know what? He got to experience that. And I know that made him very, very happy. So I feel it was the ultimate sign of respect to Cliff Burton and Ray Burton as well.
And also, most of all, that it was so meaningful for so many people because it meant a lot to me, and I wanted it to mean a lot to the guys in the band and the fans. I really, really did.
Speaking of Cliff, his affinity for classical music has been well documented over the years. Looking back and considering your theory, Kirk, of how composers like Bach, Beethoven, and others may have been the predecessors to heavy metal, makes you wonder how well Cliff's visions would have been received in that era.
He had a real penchant for Baroque music and something called contrapuntal technique, which is one instrument doing something and another instrument doing something completely different, but they work. They interlock. And Cliff was very, very interested in those musical techniques as well as theory and harmony. And so he had everything under his fingertips, all the musical theory and the knowledge and the inspiration to just do whatever he wanted to do. And I was just kind of blown away. And yes, if Cliff Burton was still around, he would have pursued more of that kind of thing. He liked a lot of dynamics in his music and he loved melody. So yeah, I think that if Cliff would have been still around, he would have gone further in that direction and would have brought in a more Baroque influence, I feel.
Metallica's music is sort of constructed to kind of lend itself to classical arrangements. I mean, Cliff Burton was really key in bringing that energy and that ingredient to the band. I was actually very impressed with The Day That Never Comes. I have so many people tell me that they feel that that is the new classic. That is the new kind of One or Sanitarium. I remember when we were preparing this music and we were writing it, it was really very collaborative, and it was really neat to see that as a band we incorporate these different styles or these different ingredients into the compositions. So that song in particular has become a favorite of mine, and it really holds up well with an orchestra.
Black your eyes, just keep it close.
Day That Never Comes from Metallica's S&M2, available online and in stores now. I'm Andy Hall. We'll be back with more right after this.
Blackened American Whiskey, the masterful collaboration from legendary distiller Dave Pickerel and Metallica. Together, they forged Blackened, gold medal winner at the 2020 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Blackened! BlackenedWhiskey.com. Blackened, this is American whiskey, remastered. 45% alcohol by volume, bottled by Sweet Amber Distilling Company, Mineville, New York. Please enjoy responsibly.
You are listening to a celebration of Metallica's S&M2. I'm your host, Andy Hall, here again with the four members of the band, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and Robert Trujillo. All of us excited about the release of this album, available now everywhere. James, let's talk Unforgiven 3 and your decision to take the guitar off and sing without it. Not a common occurrence whatsoever for you. Tell me about that experience and what that felt like.
Well, yeah, I wanted to not play guitar. I really wanted to play drums instead, but no. I thought, since we're doing this for the second time, let's make this a little different. So, Unforgiven 3, yes, that seemed to fit really, really beautifully. That was certainly one that I was flying the flag most for.
For the rest of you, having the ability to hang back and watch a Metallica show while it's going on, another uncommon occurrence. What were your thoughts watching James up there alone with the orchestra? Lars, we'll begin with you.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, he brought it, and also not having the band, the wall of sound envelop him, made him sort of vulnerable, and I think that that's where that song connects in the greatest way possible. So I think that it was awesome, and I'm happy that he was up for it, and the fact that it came together, and I think that it was the right song for the right moment with the right lyric and the right vibe, and so that came together so well. And I was actually down in the audience for that, kind of huddling and hanging out with the whole crew of Metallica fans, and it was a very emotional moment.
Kirk, how about for you? That must have been pretty cool to stand back and enjoy a Metallica show for a few minutes.
Yeah, it was a real treat. I mean, you hit it on the head. Yeah, that was an opportunity where the three of us actually got to watch a Metallica show because we weren't part of the festivities at that point. It was great to see James sing a cappella with the orchestra. I thought he did an amazing job. I could tell that he really, really wanted it to be as best as he possibly could make it, and I think he pulled it off. And it was also really, really great to hear the guitar solo of Unforgiven 3 being played spread out over 70-plus instruments. That was a treat for me. It was actually overwhelming because there were so many instruments playing my guitar solo, I didn't know what to listen to at any given point. I actually can't wait for the initial release. I'm going to listen to Unforgiven 3 nonstop, I think.
James, did you have a pretty clear idea in your head of how you wanted this one to turn out?
Certain things ended up being a lot more highlighted, and we were less fearful, I think, of trying new things. And I just wanted to strip it way, way, way down, not have any of the band in it at all, and just me singing with the symphony. I thought that would be really challenging, and it certainly was, and now it's probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life. Getting up there and doing that, and connecting eyes, and everyone just kind of going, okay, it's gonna be fine, all right, here we go. And then after it's done, the rest of the band high-fiving, and it was very, very encouraging.
An incredible moment for James. Sans guitar, backed by the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra for a one-of-a-kind rendition of the Unforgiven 3 on our celebration of Metallica's S&M2.
by the light of golden treasure. Was he the one causing pain with his careless dreaming? Been afraid, always afraid of the things he's feeling. He could just be gone. He would just sail on. He'd just sail on. How can I be lost if I've got nowhere to go? Search for seas of gold. How come it's got so cold? How can I be lost in remembrance I relive? And how can I blame you when it's me I can't forget? These days drift on inside a fog. It's thick and suffocating. His sinking life outside its hell, inside intoxicating. He's run aground like his life, water much too shallow, slipping fast down with the ship, fading in the shadows now. Hey, chaos away. Leave all gone away. Be gone away. How can I be lost if I got nowhere to go? Search for seas of gold. How come it's got so cold? How can I be lost in remembrance I relive? And how can I blame you when it's me I can't forget? Forgive me. Forgive me not. Forgive me. Forgive me not. Forgive me. Forgive me not. Forgive me. changes life forever. How can I be lost if I've got nowhere to go? Search for seas of gold. How come it's got so cold? How can I be lost in remembrance I live? And how can I blame you when it's me I can't forget?
The Unforgiven 3 from Metallica's S&M2, now available in a variety of forms worldwide. James, opening selections from Metallica's back catalog to a new and completely different interpretation when you're playing alongside the San Francisco Symphony. What's that like for you as the creator of so many of these to hear someone else's interpretation through such a wide variety of instrumentation?
It is beautiful. Some stuff's a little hard to grasp. Other stuff is instantly lovable. And then I can't unhear it. You know, once you hear it, it's like, oh, now that part's missing every time we play it, you know. But we've been so blessed in our careers around having other people interpret our songs, whether it's, you know, baby lullabies or bluegrass or death metal or industrial or whatever it may be. We've been very blessed to be able to hear our stuff digested in different genres of music. Some are a lot more appealing to me than some others, but the fact that they are choosing you because they enjoy that song, that is the hugest compliment. Someone wanting to cover your song and they're a jazz band or something, you know, I love that.
Kirk, for you, considering your passion for classical music, it's got to be especially satisfying to hear these songs reach a new potential.
Almost all modern genres of music come from classical music. It was the only precedent. You know, jazz was being developed in the teens and the 20s. It wasn't a precedent. Those jazz guys couldn't say, oh, what the jazz guys do before me, because there wasn't any jazz guys before them. But there were classical composers. And so these guys would listen to classical music like Chopin and Brahms and Beethoven, and they would get ideas from these composers and these pieces. So classical music, I mean, it drives a lot of music that we hear nowadays. What I really like to do when I'm just sitting around and I'm looking for ideas or I'm fishing for inspiration is I like to put on a piece of classical music and pretend that every single instrument is a different guitar. And when I do that, the entire piece changes and all of a sudden I'm hearing ideas and other guitar parts and other situations that I would never think about, you know, or dream about. So classical music for me is like one of the biggest resources to get ideas and inspiration from.
Lars, how do all these moving parts affect the presentation of a show like S&M2 when compared to a tour consisting of just the four of you?
We memorize all this stuff from rehearsal, so we can't just extend the songs or change the arrangements or do any of that shit. Then it's a total meltdown. So we have to really be on our toes in terms of just knowing basically every single moment, everything a nanosecond from beginning to end, 2 hours and 45 minutes worth.
Robert, how did the aesthetic and vibe of S&M2 feel from your standpoint up there amongst all those orchestra members?
You got to figure there were people there that probably never seen an orchestra before, and there were also probably fans of the San Francisco Philharmonic that had never been to a Metallica show. So you're surrounded by this kind of experience in this massive bubble, and so you almost feel like, again, you're on a magic carpet, you know, and it's just lifting, and we were all having so much fun. I could even see like the musicians in the orchestra kind of, they're looking at you and they're, you know, they're head banging and they're smiling, and at rehearsals they'd be waving at you and stuff like that. So there was a lot of this kind of fresh energy that we were all experiencing together, even the fans, you know.
And that energy was palpable throughout the entirety of the shows. When we return, the epic conclusion of Metallica's S&M2 celebration. Welcome back as we wrap up our celebration of Metallica's S&M2, now available worldwide in a variety of formats. I'm Andy Hall, and it's been an absolute pleasure sharing the airwaves with James, Lars, Kirk, Robert, and a cast of characters that made the weekend of September 6th through the 8th, 2019, one that will not soon be forgotten by those that were there, as well as those that will enjoy this album for all of eternity. Before we launch into the epic conclusion of the S&M2 performance, Lars, I wanted to ask, what was the idea behind the staging and the band's close proximity to the symphony members? Did you find it easier to connect with what they were doing the way it was constructed?
Whenever Metallica has played in an arena, we've basically played in the round. That's where we're the most comfortable, and that's where we feel the best connection to each other and also the best connection to the audience. We thought that if we could marry the way Metallica presents itself and play 360 and have fans around us, it makes you feel so alive and it makes you feel so connected to the whole audience equally. The kicker on this one, which was special, and it's definitely the first time that Metallica has ever played a show of this size, not just in the middle, not just in the center, not just 360, but we played without a barricade. That was crazy. And so that even made it more intimate and more special. Being able to kind of have the orchestra around the four of us, and especially me as the drummer in the middle, and then having the orchestra 360 around us was super cool.
And now, the exciting finish, as Metallica caps off another brilliant performance alongside the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. This is Enter Sandman.
Thank you. We love you.
Enter Sandman from Metallica's latest album, S&M2, available online and in stores now in a wide variety of formats. One last item in regards to the packaging, Lars, since I know it's a hands-on experience for you in terms of how the box sets in particular come out looking. Can you touch on that real quick before we wrap up?
You know, I have a lot of box sets myself from my favorite bands, and there's nothing that's of greater joy to sit with a box set and open it, you know, the gift that keeps on giving, and then you open this and then you discover that, and then there's something else under that. And for us, I mean, obviously that's one of life's great joys, tuning out the whole world and just getting to experience this new acquisition. So there are some cool box sets at different levels with different trinkets and tchotchkes, and I can tell you that I signed every one of those pieces of sheet music that's in the Crazy Next Level box. We took original sheet music from the concerts from all the players. A lot of them actually have like scribbled handwritten notes on it and so on. And the boys in the band signed all of them. That's available. So lots of cool different boxes. If you just want the music, if you want the DVDs, Blu-rays, downloads, trinkets. I think some of them come with a toaster. There's all kinds of crazy things. So it's whatever you want it to be, I guess, is kind of the applicable phrase. But lots of cool ways, depending on how you like yours served, whether you like medium or medium rare. So lots of options, and we're proud and psyched to get them all out there and to share them with the world.
You have been listening to a celebration of Metallica's S&M2. The concert comes to life and is now available for fans in a wide array of digital and physical formats. With this long-awaited Blackened Recordings release, S&M2 can be fully experienced by others beyond those who squeezed into the Chase Center over 2 unforgettable nights. S&M2 is available in stores and online now. For more information, please visit Metallica.com. Special thanks to James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and Robert Trujillo for their time. Also thanks to Scott Pingel, Avi Vinocur, Q Prime, and Blackened Recordings. The celebration of Metallica's S&M2 was produced by Vinnie Marone. The executive producer is Michael Parrish. This program is copyright 2020 by MX2 Media. No portion may be used without the consent of the producers. I'm Andy Hall. Thanks for listening.